pivotal initiative, ladies and gentlemen, which is Digital India, launched in 2015, has enabled access to internet for even the remotest parts of the country. And this rapid digitization already established Indian IT ecosystem and its capabilities as well to the world's so much so that we have been a preferred outsourcing destination for the corporate world for a while now, Madhav.
Absolutely, Aisha. In 2022, India marked a new milestone in her journey to become the chair-in-waiting for the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. India's leadership for top-scale penetration and an AI-ready market evaluated at $6.4 billion have been leveraged to establish our nation as an AI research and innovation hub. And to also give us a panoptic view of India's transformation from IT to AI superpower, please welcome on stage the Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and Electronics and IT, Government of India, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, in a dialogue with Padmaja Joshi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We were just talking in the last session about whether we are bulls in a China shop or whether we are bullish. But safe to say that Morgan Stanley is fairly bullish right now on India.
No, so are, I think, many investors and many global companies and brands that are looking at this certainly post-COVID redrawing of the tech world, and I have absolutely no hesitation in saying the world is very bullish about the future of India. I personally am. The government is very bullish on the future of India, and I think a large number of Indians are, except for a couple who make it their point to go to Stanford and say things about India, and a couple of other ex-retired chief economic advisors of the country. But otherwise, by and large, I think the world is fairly invested in this narrative of a very, very surging, accelerating India.
You know, let's talk about specifics. Sure. Now, when the Morgan Stanley report talks about how India has changed dramatically in the last 9 years, this, and I think most people in the audience also will agree, it has belied the expectations even of the well-wishers of India. There were cynics who said the pandemic is going to wipe out half of our labor workforce, that our GDP is going to crash. We weren't projected to grow beyond more than maybe 5, 6 at max. Right. What did we do right? That from a black swan event, we have not just recovered, we have rebounded.
Oh, it's a very powerful question, Padmaja, and I think a lot of this, and the answer to this is a longish one, because if you go back to 2014 and, in a sense, rewind back to what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji inherited, he inherited an economy that had gone through 14 quarters of inflation, 12 quarters of economic degrowth and IIP reduction. It was a flight of investment capital where companies like Telenor, Nokia, Etisalat were running away from India. The banking sector and the financial sector in general had been devastated by years of crony lending and NPAs that had heaped up. And the only narrative about India was what scam was the topic this day, or what the scam would be the other next day. So that was where we started this journey. And a lot of people ask me when I travel abroad and I meet people on what really contributed to India's resilient response during COVID, the pandemic. The fact that our economy rebounded so fast, the fact that we could deliver 220 crore vaccines in such an orderly manner, when even countries today are struggling to do that. And I say it is really all of the policy actions from 2014 that the Prime Minister and his government took, rebuilding the financial sector, creating a new culture of governance, not just in government, but also aimed at the financial sector, where there would be no more of this phone or loan culture that we have seen for 65 years. Transform the narrative of government versus citizen, again by turning the narrative of 6.5 decades that 100 rupees leaves Delhi, only a 15 rupees reaches a beneficiary. Change that with technology. So the fact that he put so much of technology into governance to change the narrative of governance and democracy really came to our help during the most trying black swan event that we've seen in modern India's history, which is first the COVID, then the European conflict. So I think a lot of these policy actions, I think pre-2014 we were all conditioned to think that there would be these snappy, headline-grabbing, big announcements that would change things, and we realized actually that none of that works. Actually what is required is steady, systematic policy making, maximum governance, integrity, and with clear goals and outcomes in mind. And that is what the Prime Minister did for several years leading up to COVID pandemic. And after the pandemic, all of those have really kicked in and helped us rebound in a manner that today we can see we are the fastest growing nation in the world. Who in 2014, Padmaja, I ask you, would have looked at India and said, we will be the fastest growing nation in the world? No way.
Nobody. And even now, even the report talks about how there's considerable skepticism even now in some quarters in investors abroad. They don't think this is going to last.
Look, skepticism amongst certain sections of our political class is because I think they are now over-invested in that narrative about skepticism.
Let me be more specific, because people also say, it's one thing to create money in the hands of a few, as is popular. 5 दोस्त हैं मोदी जी के, उनके हाथ में सारी wealth accumulate हो रही है, but democracy index is dipping. So this is not a long-term.
Look, one of the things about Article 19 and the right to free speech is you can say whatever you want, even if you sound like an absolute idiot. Sorry to use that phrase. This is a country today that is a beacon of democracy to the countries around the world. We have the most functional democracy, and I say to those people who are whining and whinging about EVMs, whining and whinging about democracy, whining and whinging about media and the judiciary, I ask them how come they've gone silent after the Karnataka elections. So look, there is obviously a group of people who are invested, and they are desperately invested in a narrative that we are not doing well, we will not do well as a nation. The BJP and Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, all of this is smokes and mirrors, and that is their game, that is their choice. And I have nothing to say about that, excepting the world is looking at India, investors are looking at India, when global brands like Cisco, Apple, Samsung are moving their manufacturing to India. When large brands all around the world in the electronics and tech space are looking at India as trusted partners, I say that, look, they probably know a lot more about India than some few people in the Congress party.
You're talking about manufacturing, but as an aside, we had a former RBI governor say that you're gloating about the iPhone factory, but most of it is just assembling.
Yeah, I simply say that Raghuram Rajan has to decide whether he is a failed economist or a to-be failed politician. He can't be both. If he wants to be a politician, that's fine. He can say as absurd and outrageous as things as he wants. And there is another moral to the story. What you know nothing about, it's best you be silent about those. And he certainly doesn't know anything about manufacturing or electronics manufacturing. He wrote an edit, I think some 6-7 months ago in the Times of India. I rebutted him and exposed all of his lies and false assumptions. He didn't say a word after that for 6 months. He suddenly surfaced again after the Karnataka elections, and he's come back. I certainly will rebut him in the next few days. And if he's got an embarrassing tendency to deal with pain and embarrassment, that's fine. We will deliver that for him.
A lot of people say that he is the best finance minister we didn't have.
Well, when he was the RBI governor, he certainly presided over wrecking the Indian banking system. So I actually think there are a lot of people in India who are very glad that he didn't become finance minister.
Talking about the things that we did do right. in the Morgan Stanley report, two things jumped out at me. One is they talk about the infrastructure push, which over at least the last 6 months has seen stupendous force when it comes to the central government, whether it be your Vande Bharat, metros, etc., highways. The second was that the report felt that the digitization that we have managed to achieve in our country, and especially direct benefit transfer, held us in good stead. Now, I remember Mr. Chidambaram, when he spoke in Parliament, he said, what do you think? That a roadside vendor is going to use your UPI? And yet here we are. That not only is it made possible, a roadside vendor is using UPI, but it's being mentioned as a factor. This couldn't have been easy, could it?
No, look,
real world, what were the challenges that you faced?
No, look, I think, first of all, it was an absolutely startlingly clear vision of our Prime Minister that technology can really transform governance. And if you go back to his 2015 speech in Digital India, when he launched Digital India, he laid out 3 goals. He said, first of all, technology should transform the lives of our Indian people. Then he said, technology should create more entrepreneurial opportunities and expand the economy. And the third point he laid down as a goal for Digital India is that India should move from being a consumer of technologies to being a producer of technology. And if you just stay focused on the first point, it is very clear that the Jan Dhan Yojana, DBT architecture, which was technology enabled and then UPI became the solution that came out of it, has transformed and built so much trust between even the remotest Indians and the government. And I will share a real personal, real-life example with you. I went to a district in Nagaland on one of my pravasas called Zuniboto. I drove 9.5 hours from Dimapur to get to Zuniboto through the worst terrain possible. And the next day morning, when I was with the community leaders, I asked them, how many of you have Aadhaar? Everybody. How many of you receive your pensions and your benefits and your payments from the government via your phone and your bank account? 100%. And that is the magic, that is the power of technology that the Honorable Prime Minister has harnessed. And harnessed not to demonstrate some gimmick or some innovation, but harnessed to really transform the actual physical governance process that this country has missed for 65 years. So if you ask me, that power of technology that he brought to government has in turn not just built trust between government and citizen, also spawned a very, very large innovation ecosystem. So if you today look at people saying, how come we have this large fintech ecosystem in India? It is because UPI, which was designed to solve a government citizen problem, has now become this great innovation that the world is recognizing. And so, I point to the fact that there is a person who had real life experience about what are the infirmity and gaps in India's governance. He took technology and said, let me solve these problems that affect common men and women, and let me create solutions for them. And that, I think, is the true story of Digital India. Of course, there are other stories about unicorns and startups and innovation and how we've expanded the digital economy and all of that. But the true, real underlying headline is this. And this nobody will get. The Chidambarams of the world will not get, because they're all, exotic, academic people who have never in the last 65 years ever bothered addressing these real life problems. And so I think that is the difference between those who go to Cambridge or Stanford or University of Chicago or wherever they go and wherever their tourism takes them, and people who really look at technology as an enabler to solve real problems for real people.
But what were the challenges? Because look at the size of our country. Connectivity
I think, I was in a similar program some months ago, and there were some foreign delegates in the audience, and they said, but the problem with technology is that it excludes people. And in India, technology has become the power that includes people, is actually enabling inclusion of a kind at a scale that has never been deemed possible. People who are outside the system have been included in the system and are now part of the system, whether they're formally employed, formal employment, or the government benefits. In my opinion, we underestimate Indians and people all around the country's ability to quickly adapt. So a lot of this propaganda of people, with advanced degrees from Harvard and so on and so forth, saying that no, but technology will never work. How do you think an illiterate or digitally illiterate person who's running a street vendor job will ever adapt to UPI? Is actually being contemptuous, is being patronizing of the innate ability of every Indian given the opportunity to rise, to grow, to prosper. And that is a belief that our Prime Minister has. That if we do the right thing, if we create the enabling environment and tools, people will find the way, learn, adapt, and improve their lives with those technology and tools, which is what we are seeing today. You see, extraordinarily how many people use UPI and QR codes for payments, digital payments, and it is not the big fancy people. It is the common man and the people who are micro entrepreneurs and self-employed on a day-to-day basis that use all of these platforms, because there is no corruption, there is no leakage, there are no charges, and it is absolutely smooth and efficient for them to use with a smartphone.
But the adaptation can happen maybe not always for the good. So while you will have, many people who will take to UPI, there will also be the Jamtara. There will also be the online fraud.
So look, this
disinformation.
I agree with you, and I'm absolutely telling you that we are absolutely aware of the power that technology can do in terms of its good, as well as those who can do bad with it. And that is the nature of the beast. Technology as we know it, the internet as we know it, has been always thought of as a force for good. It connects people, it allows people, it empowers people. But certainly, over the last 5 years, the phenomenon of user harm, criminality, whether it's doxing, gaslighting, cyber bullying, or just cyber crime, is also on the rise. And we are now a country with 800 million Indians online. We will have 1.2 billion Indians online by 2025. We are the largest connected nation in the world. And so this is known, this is understood, and we are taking every policy measure, every other step we can by saying that our policy goals are to make the internet in India safe and trusted for every digital Nagrik. And we take that mission very, very seriously. It's a mission that the Honorable Prime Minister has tasked us with.
But do you find social media companies, or rather find the government at a better place with social media companies? Because this became quite a sticky point. You said you were battling disinformation. They said you were trying to act like super censor.
No, so here is the thing, Padma. I think the world at large has, in a sense, missed regulating user harm that came out of technology for several years and almost a decade. Because all of these platforms masqueraded as innovation. And no government wanted to regulate innovation. So I'm a social media platform, but I am technology, I'm innovation, don't regulate me. And so therefore they continued with that for about a decade and a half, till now people have woken up that these platforms can also cause harm. And therefore we have tried to correct the asymmetry. But everything we have done, Padmaja, we have done in a consultative manner. I have persuaded, the government has persuaded every platform that it is in all our interests to make sure that the internet in India is safe and trusted, that 1.2 billion Indians trust the internet that they operate on, that they consume, that they communicate on. And so therefore, I think there is a large consensus that the internet should be safe and trusted. Now, certainly, I think you're alluding to the misinformation piece. Apart from all of the other harms of CSAM and pornography and religious incitement content that we have put out there as no-go areas for platforms, we've also said misinformation is a dangerous phenomenon.
Your fact check.
Yeah, and so we've said that the platforms have sought help, that if there is falsehood that is put out there about the government, there should be a way for the government to say, look, this thing is false. And just say that, just to say this is false. It is
but
for
you could be covering your tracks.
Sorry?
You could be covering your tracks in the name of, that would
I think
spell the end of investigative journalism.
No, I think the issue is not so much about investigative journalism. If you say 1 + 1 is 3, and we say no, but 1 + 1 is 2, or for example, as you saw in the recent case, the Washington Post article where there were 1,000 accounts that were posting misinformation, that was inciting violence, and they were posting misinformation about the government of India's actions against a particular community. So these are all very dangerous things and trends, and I want to say that we are the first government to prescribe in the rules, in the law, that Article 14, 19 and 21 cannot be violated by any platform. And Article 14, 19 and 21 is discrimination, free speech and right to privacy. So we are actually saying we are custodians of that. We will ensure that those rights are never violated. But for those who try to conflate the right to free speech as being equal to right to misinformation are mistaken. There is nothing in the right to free speech that gives you a license to say lies or pass off misinformation as the truth. And that is not an area that we are going to just take lightly because a few people say, no, but it's the right to free speech. We will certainly argue the point. We will convince them that the right to free speech does not mean misinformation, because misinformation can be weaponized. It can be weaponized against communities, it can be weaponized against an individual, it can be weaponized against governments or people within the government, and that is certainly, we believe, not the correct thing for the Indian internet.
But will you be even-handed irrespective of who is the violator? What if somebody in the BJP says? Will you be fact-checking just citizens?
So I think part of this is because people haven't understood how this will work, and I'll explain to you how this is supposed to work. If there is somebody who posts something false about a government department, and we are leaving the private sector out of it for the time being, even though there is a demand that you should do fact-checking for the private sector as well. That if there is something false that is put out there by the government, the fact-checking unit will just simply label that content as being false. There is nothing binding on the platform to take it down. So let us assume you are the platform, I am the government, I say you have a piece of content that is false on your platform. You decide, I don't care, I don't want to take it down. Nothing happens. All that happens is the immunity you have against any case is withdrawn, and then you and I, you the platform and I the aggrieved party because of the content on your platform, will go to a court of law, and the court will decide who's right and who's wrong. And that, I think, is the absolute fair, because willy-nilly in the UPA time, in the IT Act, there is a blanket safe harbor and protection against legal cases that have been given to all these social media platforms under Section 79. Which means if I'm aggrieved by something on your platform, I have no way of taking you to court and arguing my case that I'm aggrieved, which is a denial of natural justice. So this is really just about leveling the asymmetry between the platform who hides behind this immunity under Section 79 and those who are aggrieved in the government or otherwise, saying that, look, I want to get this adjudicated by a court. So this is, if you go into the detail, it's absolutely fair, it is absolutely transparent and absolutely necessary that those who have the power to viralize misinformation have also the accountability of answering that in a court of law under due process, of course.
But will it only apply to disinformation about the central government led by the BJP or the Indian state as a whole? What if, for example, somebody from the BJP posts some misinformation about, say, the government of Rajasthan?
Right.
That, oh, communal violence is happening in Rajasthan.
Right.
Will you be going and marking that out? And
the power to, currently the framework that we have put out there is the power about the central government. Now, if this is acceptable and it works, and these rules have a tendency to constantly evolve, we can also expand and say that this could be the same labeling about state governments, regardless of which party is in power. The issue here is not about politics. The issue is that misinformation is toxic. Misinformation can be weaponized. Misinformation is bad for the internet. And it is clearly with the emerging challenges of AI and the imaging powers of AI, it can translate into such authentic deepfakes that you and I certainly will not be able to know the difference between what is a deepfake video and a real video. And you know that the power of the internet is such that something that is misinformation travels much faster with a higher velocity than anything that is real. So if I put a deep fake out there saying Padmaja is ABCD something something, it will travel like that. But if I just say, oh, Padmaja is an reasonable anchor and journalist, that will not travel that much. I mean, we've done experiments and studies in our ministry that shows that misinformation can travel at a velocity of 15 times faster and reach an audience 100 times more than regular truth.
Speaking of AI, is there any such thing, is it possible for there to be any such thing as ethical AI, given that it is anyway informed by the biases of the creator?
Yeah, so I think we are not using that phrase anymore. The way our government is now, we are in pre-consultation discussions about the Digital India Act. How we want to approach AI and regulating AI is through the prism of user harm. So we are not getting into these conversations about ethics and risk-free and so on and so forth. We are basically saying the law will define the areas that constitute harm. And you as an innovator can do anything. You as a platform can do anything as long as these guardrails are not violated. So in using Latin, thou shalt not cause harm is the principle by which we want to regulate AI, Web3, and any future emerging technology that has the power to disrupt, power to distort, power to cause harm. This is our principle as we understand today. We certainly will do deep consultations with the industry, with startups, with academics, with citizens before we finalize how we will regulate AI. But the concern that people have in the world and concern that people have in India that AI is a very different force. It is like the internet, that it does good, but it is the complexity of the bad that it can do is much more than the bad that the normal internet can do. So some of the concern that has been expressed, including by Sam Altman in front of the Congress, etc., the US Congress, not the Indian Congress, is justified, that it is not something that we should go to sleep on. We should be wide awake and very alert to building the guardrails around it. So we are in the midst of doing that.
So one aspect is, of course, the disinformation, and this whole fact-checking actually is going to have it much harder when it comes to AI.
Absolutely.
The other very real fear right now in India is about how, on the one hand, we are trying to create jobs. On the other, you have this AI, which could make a lot of us defunct. How do you...
No, look, I actually think the tech sector, and I was listening to Mr. Piramal when he wound up, that is the red hot area in terms of job creation and new job opportunities and new investment opportunities. It is just going to be just very, very exciting in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, it is quite clear that within that sector, there is going to be a redrawing and reshaping of the workforce. AI is certainly going to make some of the traditional jobs in the tech sector slightly irrelevant or less relevant, but it's going to throw up a whole new category of data scientists, annotators, and whole new category that does not exist today. So I think in a net sum, if you look at it, that AI is going to obviously, the way I present it is not that AI is going to cause loss of jobs. It is certainly going to restructure the job market in the tech space. It is going to create a lot of new jobs. It is going to make a few jobs irrelevant. And the tech space in general, and our Prime Minister's goal is to make it a $1 trillion digital economy, or 20% of the GDP by 26, is going to be the place where a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunities are going to be created.
Well, on that optimistic note, one, you can have the fear of the unknown, or you can have a harnessing of the unknown to create better jobs and a better country.
Don't fear it, don't fear it.
Won't fear.
Thank you.
Daro mat, as Mr. Gandhi said.